Hey everybody, it's Rudy Basso, the co-owner of Don't Split the Podcast Network. I would like to encourage you, lovely listener, to head on over to our website and give a listen to my show that I host with my brother called Game O'Clock. It is a video game retrospective, introspective, other spectives, all about the kind of games that we love. And to be honest, we love just about every game out there. Game O'Clock released every Thursday. It's fun, it's short, and hey, you'll probably learn something about video games.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. This week on the show, I'm talking with game designers Rob Schwalb and Teos Abadia about making money in tabletop RPGs. Teos has written many a D&D adventure, and Rob has worked on 3 different editions of D&D and is the creator of the excellent Shadow of the Demon Lord, among many other great games. This talk really opened my eyes about just how small this industry is. Let's jump right into the good stuff. Here's my chat with them. All right, everybody, now I am here with Teos Abadia and Rob Schwalb. Guys, welcome to Tabletop Babble. It is amazing to have you here. For those who are not familiar with the wonderful work that both of you do, why don't you let people know what it is you've worked on and what they might know you from. Teos, why don't we start with you?
That's a good idea. Then I'll make Rob look good, as he should in comparison to my meager efforts. I have been fortunate enough to work as a freelancer, primarily with Wizards of the Coast, writing adventures and a few other types of things, but primarily adventures. And it's been amazing, just the last few years, being able to write for the game that I love, being able to contribute to the thought space around what the adventure experience can be like and some of the big events. So I've written the Dungeons & Dragons Open last year, and maybe we'll get a chance to do that again for this year, which is at the Origins Convention. Some of the adventures I'm known for are Vault of the Dracolich and Candlekeep, that were sort of special event type adventures. And then I've written my own stuff that's available on the DM's Guild, like an adventure Adamantine Chef.
Awesome. All great works. People should definitely go check those out. Rob, what have you worked on that people might know you from?
Oh, not too much. I've sucked down too much beer to even remember very clearly anymore. But so I'm Robert Schwalb. First of all, thank you very much for having us both on the show today. I'm very excited to be here. I've been doing RPG tabletop design and development for closing on 16 years. And I worked on everything from A Song of Ice and Fire role-playing to supplements for 3 editions of D&D. And I was on the design team for 5th edition D&D. I launched my own imprint called Schwalb Entertainment. That way I would never forget who I worked for. And our primary release in the game is Shadow of the Demon Lord, a delve into horror fantasy like none other. Over the last 18 months or so, I think we released 116 things.
It is an incredible amount of work, and a lot of it was written by you personally, right? You did a lot of the design by yourself. I
sure did, as my now fatty liver tells me.
Yes, yeah. Well, and that's what I wanted to talk about. I think for a lot of people out there, role-playing game designer, the job role-playing game designer seems like an ideal, amazing job. And, in some respects, I think it certainly is. You two are living that dream, as it were. Teos, we should probably say right up front that if it is okay with you, that you also have a full-time job, not within the industry, and that you are sort of, I don't know actually when you are between being a father and having a full-time job and all of the other things you are managing to put out amazing content, but you are. And Rob, you are full-time, but I would say it's like working 2 full-time jobs probably for you.
Yeah, pretty much. The Demon Lord is my full-time gig, but I still do some freelance on the side to keep the lights on. So and Demon Lord itself is enough work to kind of keep anybody really, really busy.
Totally. And so before we get into, making money and all that, I sort of just want to give people an idea of what the breadth of work is like. when you are working on something like this. So Teos, you wrote an article that you've updated on your own site, Alphastream, that is all about what is a D&D adventure worth. And you break down sort of what people's perception of how much time you spend on writing a 4-hour adventure, how much time you spend as the designer on it, their perception versus the reality. Why don't you talk just a little bit about that to give people an idea?
Yeah, the quick, and I do keep that blog post up to date with my earnings as well, which is sort of a nice contrast as time goes on. But I basically threw up a poll on Twitter and I said, what do you guys think? I've made this much so far with my first independent product on the DM's Guild. What do you think about the amount of sales? Does this sound about right or not? And at that point, it was a royalty of $82, 33 sales. In the first 20 days. And I said, does that sound great? And they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great, is what most people said. And then I said, well, how long do you think it took me to write a 4-hour adventure? And the biggest amount was somewhere between 26 and 40 hours was a third of respondents. But there was another third that thought it was either 10 to 25 hours or less than 10 hours. And that third is horribly wrong, just to be clear. The idea that it would take me, 25 hours or less to write a 4-hour adventure, I wish I were that efficient, but no. And especially if I start adding in all the various sideline activities that come with writing an adventure, not just the writing itself, it's way above that. And as I, then turn to other people to kind of say, like, all right, if you've actually done this work professionally, am I crazy? Does it take you less than 40 hours? And people said more than 40 hours was the majority of respondents. And then talking to people, they would say, really, it's more than 60 is what most of the people that I kind of know personally said back to me. Now, there are some really awesome, efficient writers out there. I would guess that Rob is one of them. But for a lot of us to produce a good 4-hour adventure takes a lot of work. I mean, 60 hours can be kind in what it takes to write something that's really good, that you might get at the level of like Adventurers League, and I still consider that to be very good. So yeah, there's a big gap between perception and reality there.
Yeah, that is huge. And, for saying, it sounds like you're making maybe $1, $2 and change or so per hour then if you're looking at it that way. Rob, what about you? What's your experience like when you sit down to write something like an adventure, say?
Well, it depends on how long that adventure is. One of the things I did with Demon Lord was to reduce the workload that goes into building long-form adventures. In fact, of all the things I could possibly do for tabletop gaming, writing adventures is the one that makes me want to cut my wrists the most.
Really?
Because, I hate it. I hate every minute of it. And it's not because I don't think it's worthwhile work. I think it's crucial work, right? I think it's the stuff that keeps your game alive. But it is grueling because, as we've heard, it takes an obscene amount of time. I have never been able to produce an adventure rapidly. I always overthink it because the number one complaint people have for published adventures is that they're too railroady. Well, the more meaningful choices you put into the adventure, the harder it is, the longer it takes, and the longer the actual adventure becomes. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I did with Demon Lord was to reduce the page count. You paint with a broader brush rather than get into the nitty-gritty details. We're looking at kind of a bird's eye view, and it gives the game master tools enough to construct a story that is interesting and exciting and compelling and can be played in one 4-hour setting. So our adventures typically run 5 to 10 pages on average. So the Adventurers League adventures are how long?
It depends. These days they are a little shorter because of the 5e format, but they can be 35 pages and up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So that's a lot of words. But even when I'm doing a 5 to 8, I mean, if I'm doing a 5-page adventure and I'm really building out a complex plot, or a 5 to 10 page adventure, and there's a lot of things going on, and I have to do all the front work where I'm kind of plotting out where the decision trees are going to be and all the various types of creatures that I'm going to be referencing, and to make sure it's all balanced and all that good stuff, and then make it evocative and cool. We're still looking for that length, 20 hours.
Yeah. And
then I sell those adventures for anywhere from $1.49 to $3. That's just the writing part, right? I mean, I'm assuming that when I write an adventure for Demon Lord, I'm doing that as advertising, right? To push more people back to the core rulebook. But if I hire somebody to do it, like the other 28 adventures that are on my website, I'm out money. I'll never earn that back at the prices that I charge. Never in a million years will I break even on those adventures. Wow. Everyone's a loss.
Sure, and then there's other factors to consider, right? Adventures can sometimes have art with them that somebody had to make. Somebody had to take the time to draw that art, right? Somebody had to take the time to make any maps that might be included. If it's, if somebody's editing, if somebody's doing layout, all of those things take time, and people's time, costs money. And, I think one of the things that is very interesting is you're talking about those low prices, right? You're talking 4 hours of entertainment for, let's say, 5 people, right? A game master and 4 players, say, and you pay less than $1.50 is an incredible deal. It's an incredible deal. You'll pay more for a soda at a vending machine.
Yeah, it's too incredible a deal is the problem that our industry has, I think.
I mean, I just kind of drive it home, and I'll give you some hard, real prices. I released an adventure that's about 5 or 6 pages recently. I paid out $200 for the writing, $200 for the writing. I paid $150 for the art piece that went with it. I paid $150 for the map, and then I paid $100 for editing because I think that's pretty close. And then layout cost me around $50. So if you were keeping track at home, that's $2, $4, $700, $750 to just get it out there. And then if you really want to start crying and snort and snot going everywhere, $750 at $1.49. We're not even include $1.49. I'm exclusive with drive-through. Mm-hmm. So that means I get 70% of everything that I sell. So it will take me. I will have to sell 750 units to break even. Now at that price point. Now the interesting thing about for people, because they don't show units sold, but I just want to give the kids at home an idea what 750 units means. That means you're at gold. Mm-hmm. Look at how many gold products are out there on drive-through. Look how many sit at Electrum or silver or barely get to copper, and that gives you kind of a sense of perspective as far as what units are what we're selling them at or we're selling them for versus just what the number of bodies that are out there. Wow. It's a remarkable number that I try not to think too much about.
Yeah, it's hitting something like 750 units on an adventure is exceedingly difficult. I can share and again I keep these up to date, but on Adamantine Chef, I've so far sold 135 through the middle of January. And it's a year there. So having 6 times that sale volume would be pretty difficult. I could reduce the price, I could do various things, but that's pretty tough. And even on something like Howling Void, which is an Adventurers League adventure that started in January of last year, that is available as a bundle. It's part of the Adventures League program, so a lot of collectors get it, a lot of people who are running it for stores, for conventions. It creates a big amount of volume. And I'm at 600 sales total there, which is actually pretty good in terms of volume. Not great money, but it's great volume. But that's still, with all of those engines behind there driving the sales.
It's very interesting to hear you talk about this because there is a way now adventure writers are paid, right? There's sort of 2 ways to do it. One is you make a word rate, and the other is you might get a slice of the royalty pie, right? And hearing that 750 is well into the gold bestseller rating on something like Drive-Thru, that gives you an idea of what you might get. And so if you're selling on the Dungeon Masters Guild, you get a 50% royalty rate. If you're selling anywhere else on Drive-Thru, it's 70%. And now going forward, if you are selling through the Adventurers League for seasons 5 and forward, you make 60% through the Dungeon Masters Guild. And that's sort of the way the Adventurers League pays their people now is through this royalty system, essentially because they've realized it will pay better than paying 5 or 6 cents a word. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is really the top of the industry is kind of like 10 cents a word, right? And Rob, you said you've been in the industry for about 15, 16 years now. Is that changed from when you were working working in the industry, or has that been static?
I think the 10 cents a word was when I started, shortly after, a couple of years after I started, that was an unthinkable rate. No one got paid 10 cents a word. I mean, there were probably a few people who did, but it was largely unheard of. Rates started to creep up, I think, a little bit with certain publishers. And I think you can pretty much reliably get 6 to 7 cents a word from Paizo, and you can probably get about the same from Wizards if you're doing a project for them. But 10 cents a word pretty much was the cap, I guess. And I haven't seen I've not gotten much more than 10 cents a word, maybe once or twice.
Yeah, I agree with that. Working as a freelancer for Wizards, that's pretty right. And 10 cents, if you're going to get, actually even getting like 8 or 10, say during the 4E era, was based on a sort of special project where they wanted a particular person. They said, hey, we really want you to do this, and we want it to be an excellent job because it's this particularly important thing. So we're going to give you this. Or it might be a flat fee that, if you did the math on the word count, came out to be 10 cents, maybe even 11. But it was based on the fact that this was a really impressive, important project, and you knew you were going to burn, say, twice the amount of time you usually did on it.
Right. I know that I have not made it a secret about the rates that I pay, but I don't hire a lot of freelancers for this reason. It's hard for me to pay somebody less than 10 cents a word, given the amount of effort and blood, sweat, and tears that goes into a particular project. If I'm asking you to write 3,000 words, and I expect those to be perfect words or as damn close to them as you can be, but to get there, to do that kind of work, it's worth $300. Because if you spend 20 hours doing it, that seems fair. Yeah. I've taken 20 hours of your life away, and you might be enjoying it, but it's 20 hours of your life away. And it seems like it's pretty reasonable to ask for me to give you what I can.
And I love the way you think, Rob. Though you're not surrounded by like minds, right? I mean, I get why, because it's so difficult, as you were talking about, to make the volume. But most smaller publishers are paying way below that. There was an article in February of 2015 that was on Ian World that kind of drew a lot of discussion, because in it, Morris wrote kind of what rate. He basically dug around and found rates for various industry members and put them all on one page. So you could compare the Wizards and Paizo upper numbers and Pinnacle against 5 cents for Evil Hat and 4 cents for Steve Jackson and 3 cents for Goodman Games, and from 1 cent and sometimes higher for Kobold Press. Pelgrane between 3 and 7. You could see those numbers out there, and it's a great read. I've been offered, I think the year after one of what I thought was a really great project that I'd done at Gen Con, I received an offer from, I'm not going to name them, but a major name that said, we'd like you to write a Gen Con event for us. And they named the dollar amount, and I was like, wait a minute. And I did the math, and it was less than 1 cent.
Wow.
And so I just politely kind of said, because this person's a great person, nice member of the industry, and I said, hey, I just want to point out, this is a really low rate. And they're like, yeah, we're not so sure whether we'll sell it, which, by the way, they did end up selling it. And, it's a convention thing. And I said, well, honestly, I have to decline, not just because it's a low rate, but because I have to tell you, I don't think it should be this way. But someone else did take that job. They still talk about it. They still promote it and still sell it.
Well, that's kind of the thing that I think that's unfortunate about. The most unfortunate thing is that there's always someone that's willing to work for less. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of part of the false promise of the gaming industry, is that this is somehow going to be everything you wanted to do. And then, I look at my contemporaries when I got started, because I got started when the D20 bubble was just starting to grow. And there was a ton of appetite for D20 writers. And so people could get writers for garbage. I mean, I started off, I did one job for 1.5 cents a word. And then I did a bunch of 3 cent, 4 cent jobs. And, when I got 5 cents a word, that was remarkable. But, you think about that period of time, it was like, well, there's a lot of writers out there, and I hadn't paid my dues yet. So it was fine. But, now there's no reason you can't publish if you really want to get into it, there's no reason you shouldn't be self-publishing, because you'll make more in the long run. But you'll also get a good sense of what it costs to make these products. and what it costs you, not just out of your treasure chest, but also your time, your state of mind, and your love for the hobby. Because, if you do this day in, day out for 15, 20 years, your opinions on role-playing games are going to change in pretty shocking ways. And it's not going to be the same fun thing that you do with your friends anymore. It's going to be work. And I tell a lot of people who come up to me and say, I'm really interested in getting the game industry. It's like, why would you do that? Why don't do this for fun? Do it. You love doing this, but why try to monetize it? I mean, if you're really good at what you do, then pursue it, right? But if you're just thinking, I like this thing, I think I'm good at this thing, I should be making money at this thing, that's wrong. You should be really good at this thing, and you should value your work, and this is your career, and not an opportunity for you to make a few extra bucks. I'm rambling.
I agree.
I get grumpy about that.
No, I agree. And, I worked for a lot of organized play programs for free, countless hours of volunteer work, not just writing adventures, but writing meta-org documents and helping convention organizers and just you name it. I did all sorts of stuff because I was enjoying it. And that's totally cool. And I think there's that duality of knowing that, hey, you can do this because you're just going to enjoy it. And that's great. But then also realize that you can earn money and you should demand the money that you think the job is worth, right? You should always be okay with that, with saying to someone, this is not enough, or, hey, other people are getting paid, I'd like to receive some payment. There are ways to make some money in this industry. They aren't great. It is challenging if you're trying to make this your real living, but there isn't really a reason why you need to accept a low rate if you'd rather have a high rate. I still support someone who wants to volunteer, for example. I think that's great. But if you would like to be making money from the hobby, you can and should turn down bad pay.
That's interesting because I think there are a couple of things that contribute to the fact that working in this industry is a struggle and that there are some lower wages out there, right? And Rob, I think you touched on it when you said there's always somebody willing to write for less. That's definitely true. There's a lot of people who want to get into professional game design and will accept a low rate, particularly if they're just starting out. Hey everybody, James Introcaso wanted to take a quick break to let you know all about Audible.com, who is sponsoring this podcast. For you, the listeners of Tabletop Babble, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their audiobook service. One book that I think you would love is The Hobbit Unabridged by J.R.R. Tolkien, or Tolkien. I don't care how you say it. In fact, you could probably find out how it's pronounced by listening to the audiobook. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/DSPN. That's audibletrial.com/DSPN for your free audiobook. All right, let's get back to the good stuff. I think there is this idea that people don't want to pay as much for a role-playing game product as they would for something like a board game or a video game or a nice dinner, out with their friends. And that's an interesting perception too. And Teos, you and I had a podcast back on the Tome Show where we touched on this a little bit, and you said people are willing to drop $60 on a video game, but $50 seems like too much for a player's handbook, and we can't seem to understand why, right? Like you get more hours of entertainment out of it. You get a social experience out of it, which you can get with video games, but not all of them. There's so much more fun packed into one book than there is, with a video game, even if it's 200 hours long. And I got some comments back that said, well, that's because it costs more to make a video game than it does to make a role-playing game system. And I don't know that that's true, right? You've got a lot of the same things. You've got artists who need to get paid. You've got game designers who are making all the rules. You've got play testers, and they need to be coordinated, and their feedback needs to be read. And, a lot of the same things go into making a core rulebook that go into making a video game. So how do you think we change the mindset of the consumer? And obviously, if we had the silver bullet answer to this, right, we would all do it. But how do you change the mindset of the consumer, and over time, what can people start to do to sort of get it in their heads like, okay, this is something that is worth my hard-earned cash, to sort of, help increase those then rates, and then people can maybe, charge $1 more for an adventure and still have it be less than $2.50 instead of less than $1.50. Like, how do we do that? How do we change the mind of the consumer?
I mean, I think one thing is increasing the spread of knowledge, which is things, that's what Tabletop Babble and other podcasts and blogs that discuss these issues can do. Because the more that I've learned about the industry, even before I worked at all within it, and before I was getting paid by it, the more I understood, oh, wow, like this is, there's a reality there that I don't expect, right? Like here's something that blows a lot of people's minds when I share, right? The number of copies of the original Dungeons and Dragons edition, right, sold in 1974 and through the end of the fourth print of 1975. The number of copies of that old little booklet greatly exceeds the number of most RPGs that are launched these days.
Sure does.
When you're talking about them selling 1,000 copies in the first 11 months, then another print run of 2,000, another run of 3,000, then the fourth print run is 25,000, right? Like those numbers, you can compare that to Numenera, which we think of as a darling, right? Which had about 6,000 physical orders and then a bunch of other items. But, say more than a little over 6,000 physical books that came as the Kickstarter, right? So you're talking about OD&D levels maybe in 2013, right? Like our industry has not changed beyond that. And yet we might say like, oh, Montecook Games, who of course are rolling in dough, right? Or Wizards of the Coast, which, I don't know why they charge me $60 for a book. They could charge me half that, right? Our perception as a collective gaming group is so off from the reality of how low some of these sales volumes are outside of, say, D&D and a few Paizo books and things like that, and how difficult it is for these publishers to come up with a winning model. Numenera, Montecook Games have a winning model on Kickstarter, and it's a great model, and they produce great products. But we shouldn't think that it isn't difficult, right? Like it is very difficult for them to come up with that winning model. And they're one of the ones we think of as a darling. And it's even harder for everybody else, right? Dungeon World talked about having a great month in the year 2013 with 376 copies sold, right?
Yeah.
Fate had second quarter sales of 9,000 something, You go through all of these, right? And it's like that for most smaller publishers. It's only when you get to something like the red box for D&D, which was said to maybe sell 1 million copies in 1989, right? That it's only at that scale that you break into that. And the reality, it's tough for the whole industry. And the more that we understand that, what it takes, like Rob sharing how hard it is to break even, that an adventure for Shadow the Demon Lord is more of a marketing expense and a way to enable the gameplay and the customer to stay connected than it is something that makes money. And if it's not making money for Rob and it's not making money for the person who wrote it, maybe then we should pay more for it.
The interesting thing, though, and this is the problem that I run into when I think about why people devalue RPGs is because I think, and this is going to be maybe a little cynical, but I think it's because there are so many dead games out there. Whenever a new role-playing game comes out, you're not competing for attention you're not just competing for attention against D&D or the top 5 tabletop RPGs that are out there. You're also competing against every other RPG that's come out in the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about the fact that, yeah, you know what, little Johnny, you can go to a half-price bookstore or a used bookstore, and you probably get all the first edition books for under $10. And you know what? You've got a full role-playing game experience there. You don't need anything else. And the same thing's probably true for second edition. And now that in third edition is now old enough now that you can probably pick up a good chunk of third edition books for next to nothing. And you really want to go cheap, fourth edition books are dirt cheap wherever you look. So, you think about the fact that there's a secondary market there that I think is contributing to a lot of the misconceptions about what an RPG product is worth. I think that's then compounded by the fact that RPGs over the last decade or so, and this is changing now, have a kind of a periodical model where there's a new big thing every month. Where to have a complete collection, you have to sink in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I mean, remember the heights of third edition when you'd get one hardback core book, you'd also get a Forgotten Realms book, you might get an Eberron book too, and you might get a D20 Modern book all in the same month. Not to mention Star Wars. And if you want all of it, you're shelling out $100, $150 in a month. And, I think that the accumulation of these dead books are starting to weigh us all down. Now, I mean, I know I said I released 116 things. My business model is very much embracing part of this in the sense that people want new things all the time. They want new stuff to read because a lot of gamers out there, I think, play the games in their heads. And as much as I fight against playing a game in your head, I would much rather you play Shadow of the Demon Lord with your friends or with your enemies or with strangers or whatever else. I know a lot of people just read this stuff to read it. And so it's the way I do it is by giving a steady stream of PDF products. And then we only have one traditional printed rule book. That's it. Everything you need to play the game is in that one book. So I know that I'm trying to have the cake and eat it too kind of thing, where I'm trying to curb my impulses by pushing out another big hardback book every 3 months.
Right.
But I'm still also keeping people aware of the game with a steady stream of digital content.
I think that makes sense, right? And especially because if there's one thing that I've seen work for people who are smaller, and I include, or at least at my size, like sort of an individual trying to, like, say, put adventures out on the guild. The only thing that I've ever seen that seems to provide good numbers is having a large number of offerings. Now, of course, that means a huge effort, but when you have a lot of adventures out there, even at a very low cost, then that can add up because you can start adding bundles. Or I've seen people kickstart using the OGL, so they don't have to pay the DM's Guild royalty level, where they'll release an adventure for a very low amount, then they launch their second Kickstarter with a little, with both available, and eventually they're making $15,000 on a Kickstarter. And for an individual like myself, then that's actually finally decent money, though again, you have to be writing all this, so it is some real work. Right. But it takes that volume to do it.
I'm still just basically a one-man operation with contractors. And even though I'm able to make enough money to continue to do products and to pay myself a little bit, I can't hire anybody full time. And considering all the number of hats that I have to wear in order to keep this company rolling, I mean, just imagine the amount of work that is, right? I mean, I'm the shipping manager, I'm the customer service guy, I'm the social media guy, I'm the line developer, and it just goes on and on and on. And you think about, and I'm just breaking even, or making a little bit, but I'm not rolling around in cash. And so, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where we're going with this. Just that even that is still not. It's still not enough.
Yeah. And then, Rob, the other thing I would ask is, you are married, correct, to a person with a job that has health insurance?
Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah. If it was in any other situation, I'd probably close up shop or drastically cut back my company because I would have to go and do something else.
Right.
Yeah, and I could never live off of what I do, right? I mean, I don't know a way to do that to like cover health insurance, to provide for the 2 kids I have, my wife. I mean, my wife works, I work, and with other jobs. But I do want to go back and say one thing to what you said, Rob, which was around that when we were talking about sort of the value of things, and the large amount of product that's out there. One thing I do want to say is that even when I buy a game that I don't play all the time, all right, so D&D is sort of my mainstay. And then I have games that I dig a lot, like Shadow of the Demon Lord. Thank you, Rob. Like Knights Black Agents. I dip into those at least once a year and often more. And then I have games like, say, I got Feng Shui 2. And I got my full cover price money's worth just reading through that book, because it was more than an hour of enjoyment. I ran a game for some friends that was like 4 hours, and we talked about it, and it was a bundle of fun, and it's a super high value book. I love having it on my shelf. And though I probably will play it again, if I never did, I would still have gotten more enjoyment out of that book than I would have if I'd bought tickets to the movies with my friends and we'd all gone together. And it would have been the same price.
Yeah.
So right. I think that even as a just addition to the shelf that you don't pay, these books are well worth the price and probably underpriced at that level still.
I mean, you think about what textbooks sell for now, and your production quality that goes into textbooks and the print numbers, to be honest, are probably pretty comparable to what we're seeing in RPG stuff. And granted, I know that textbooks are inflated; the prices are inflated. But if you're paying $250 for a textbook, and you're going to use that for one class and sell back and pray that you get at least a quarter of your dollars back, it seems to me that spending $50 on a full color hardback rule book seems like a pretty damn good deal. And even if you never play it, just for the art alone, it's worth it.
These are often products that are artisan made, right? I know that that's kind of a buzzword for hipsters, but like this idea that these are handcrafted and made as labors of love by artists, by people who, I think what you were saying, Rob, about like, if you can do anything else, you should, right? Like that's the advice actors get. It's the advice other artists get. And I think, a lot of people who end up doing role-playing games either until 4 a.m. like Teos is doing, or all day and then ripping out their hair like Rob is doing, it's because they feel this need to make games. And without those people, we would not have the games to play. It is fascinating to me to see what it takes and the drive that it takes to continue to do what you're doing in the industry. And, I think people are shocked when they learn the amount of people whose name they might recognize that's on a product, but hey, this person also has a full-time job because, they have other things that they need to support is fascinating. And then we see all these other things crop up like the RPG Creators Relief Fund, which is there to help RPG creators who maybe get into a bad way. They have some sort of accident or medical need or their house burns down, and this fund is there to help support them. And it just makes me feel a little sick that we even need that, since we all love these games so much. But in the idea of making money, we talk about consumers and what they'll pay for a product. It does seem like Kickstarter is a place where people maybe don't mind paying as much. And again, not everybody, but don't mind paying perhaps what a product is actually worth. And why do you guys think that is? Is it the eventiness of the Kickstarter, that when a Kickstarter gets real hot, everybody wants to jump on board? Is it because they feel like they are contributing to something new, to something amazing? Sort of what's the rationale there? And then also, Rob, maybe you can talk a little bit into, like, I think people see those Kickstarters get successful, like, whoa, Toma Beasts made almost $200,000. Wolfgang Bauer must be rich. Maybe you can talk a little bit about where all of that money actually ends up going.
Sure, yeah. I think that the Kickstarters blow up the way they do is because perceived value. I don't think enough of a percentage of the backers jump into a Kickstarter because they think, I'm going to be part of something awesome. And I wish that was the case. And I mean, I'm not smashing or trashing anybody who's backed any Kickstarter ever. But I think that if you think you're getting $300 worth of books for a buy-in of $65, then you'd be a fool not to do it, right? You'd be a fool, and it's even worth the risk that the creator will never produce. And that for me is that I think is kind of one of the things. And the only reason why I put it this way is because look at the Reaper Bones Kickstarters that raise so much money, and look at all the miniatures you got for your meager investment. So I mean, it's a definitely a value kind of thing that I think pulls people into Kickstarters. Yes, I mean, part of what a Kickstarter you've got to do to, and in my opinion, you do to launch a successful Kickstarter is you not only have to make a good product, but you also have to personally connect with the people that are going to support you. You have to make them invested in your success so that everything happens in a magical way at the end. It's very much of a hydra of a problem or even an opportunity, but I think a large part of that is certainly perceived value. I think where you get the big burst of numbers is not because there are 2,000 people who really love you. It's because there are at least 1,500 people there that really say, that's a really damn good deal.
Do you think, Rob, maybe some of it is that idea of, you're not looking at that bookshelf full of all the history of all the games across history like you were talking about? You're just looking at this one link and being enticed by just this one thing.
I think so to some extent. I mean, you look at Monty's Invisible Sun Kickstarter, which I thought was a very bold and a pretty awesome project. And he's doing things with that game that I don't think have really been done in RPGs before, or at least not in that particular way. But his ask was really high. I mean, to buy in was like $200 to even just get the black cube. And they were able to raise a lot of money. But part of that was telling the customers that, look, your gaming group needs one cube, first of all. So you're dividing the cost between all of you and ensures that everyone is paying a fair share. So instead of the game master buying all the books, everyone's pitching in so you can have a really great collaborative experience. And then you're going to get more stuff as a Kickstarter balloons. And so that means that it's going to take some of the sting out of having to drop the $200 initially. The other thing, too, is that Monty is, he's been around for a really long time and he's got a following. And there are a lot of people, myself included, who believe in what he does, and that not only believe in what he does, but think he's a great game designer and an incredibly creative person. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up Monty's butt, but I think that I'm genuine. I think that he's very good at what he does, and that he's had a lot of success in making sure other people know that what he's good at. And so I think that the Invisible Sun Kickstarter is certainly an outlier. And I don't think it behaved in the way that Bones did. But if you look back at Numenera was a game that had a pretty reasonable ask for your buy-in. But then as the Kickstarter got bigger, customers got a lot of extra content, which certainly made that whatever price the buy-in was more and more appealing as you went.
Yeah, you got to be careful, I hear, with those rewards, right? Like as your Kickstarter breaks through those stretch goals and everything, you could easily say, oh yeah, now we're going to do this and we're going to add this book and this product and this adventure. And then all of a sudden you have overpromised. Don't, even though you have a lot of money, you still don't have enough money to make all of the products that you have promised people.
Yeah, the trick with Kickstarter is if you can break even by the end, you've done it right. There are obviously, the potato salad Kickstarter where the guy made a ton of money, and I'm sure that the Exploding Kittens guys made a nice tidy sum. But I think by and large, most people who run Kickstarters pretty much break even or maybe even lose a little bit on the back end, because there's always going to be unexpected costs that you don't anticipate. I mean, if you look at my Kickstarter, I think we raised $140,000, and I spent every dime of that to deliver everything that I promised. And I probably spent a little bit more because I know that I probably took money out of earnings through drive-through and my website and into distribution to kind of offset some of the costs there, because shipping is just ridiculous. And, when I promised 5 or 6 16-page supplements, I priced them at a certain thing, and they all ended up being 32 to 84 pages long. So they ended up costing me a whole lot more money. But I think in the long run, my customers were gladdened by the fact they got more value for what they invested in. So, the Kickstarter is not a way to get rich. It is a way to spend money, both for the customers and then also for yourself.
We've got a couple minutes left here. If anybody still listening at this point is like, you know what, I don't F these guys. I still want to do it. I still want to get involved. I still want to try to make my name professionally in the role-playing game industry. What do you suggest is a way for people to start? And I think one great way is to have a podcast and a blog for 3 years and invite professionals on, and slowly you will start to get work. That is my advice to people. But what do you guys think? Like, what is a good way for people to sort of make their name in the industry?
So the way I did it was through organized play, and I still think that's a great way to do it. And the reason I like coming in through organized play is because you will work with other people who are working in the admins who are working in a similar to the way a boss would. I mean, they are your bosses for this case. They will review your work. There'll be an editor and a developer. And so you'll see that process, but it's a little softer than working for an actual company that you would do it for. And so if you can get into the organized play area, which you can do by volunteering for play testing, by being at conventions and DMing, you will learn the ropes through that mechanism in a very good way. And you'll see what it takes. And it does take a lot, as we've said. One of the things that I've had as an experience being an admin for organized play campaign is that people would start writing for me and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was this hard. And then they need some help, or they even back out sometimes, disappear. That's happened every now and then. But for a lot of the ones that don't have that happen, the majority of them, they go, all right, I am really learning, like a Lever did before, about what it takes to do this. And then you come out with this discipline and this know-how that's very useful, very, very valuable to others.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think organized play is a great way to get involved. And going to conventions, is a great way to meet people like Rob or Teos or other adventure designers and pick their brain about, sort of how did you get your start and how, because everybody did it differently, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And similarly, if you're going to publish on a blog or something like that, that's a great way to get known. I mean, I think I got my first sort of my first start in Forgotten Realms, my first sort of paying job for Living Forgotten Realms organized play was as a result of being very active on the D&D forums, talking about the game and talking about what I liked about adventures in a positive way. And so I think that the admin that chose me to write something kind of said, hey, this person is always talking about the game in a good way. They're always thinking thoroughly, let's say intelligently, about these issues. They're showing me that they're a person I want to work with. So that kind of positive attitude online, through blog, through forums, that kind of thing, where other employers are going to be, there's a big Google Plus community, and you can interact with a lot of people through Google Plus, through RPG publishers, through Google Plus. And if you are saying intelligent things to them and showing that, and maybe even sharing snippets of your work, and that work is professional looking, then that's going to increase your chances to get in.
I agree with everything you said. I look back at how I stumbled into the business, and the way I did it is not even possible anymore. You used to be that you would find a small publisher and you'd go to shows and you'd shake hands and you'd meet the publishers and you'd meet editors and you'd meet developers, and you basically schlep for work. Then you also would go and submit article proposals to Dragon and Dungeon magazine over and over and over again, and hope that one day some proposal would slip out of the slush pile and you'd get a bite. Those things don't work anymore because the organized play is really the only place that you have that kind of community where you can go in and test your work. But you might not want to work on D&D, right? I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't, but you might not want to. And this kind of takes me to another avenue that I did scoff at 5 years ago, and now I'm a full believer. At this point, it's so easy to publish stuff yourself. I don't know why, if an up-and-coming game designer needs to even have to go through a publishing studio to get recognized. Now, I say that, but there are a few pits along the way. I mean, if you just have like an overinflated sense of self, like, some people do, like myself, like I do, because, until somebody shuts me down, which is often happens whenever I'm not expecting it. But anyway, going out there with a huge ego and then finding out that people don't think you're the genius that your mom told you were, that's going to be hard. And when you release your first product on drive-thru and no one buys it, or you sell 3 copies over the span of 3 years because you drew all the illustrations yourself, that's going to be that's a humbling moment. But those are also building moments, right? Those are the things that kind of make you who you are. So if you've got a really good idea, maybe you've got this setting that that's been lurking in your head where elves wear red cloaks, and this is the thing that you're going to do. It's going to change the world. Maybe just go ahead and write it. Turn your Word document to a PDF and put it out there and see what people think. And it's probably good. It's almost certain to fail. But the good thing is that it tells you, one, do you have the chops to go through the entire process of writing 120,000 words? I mean, imagine what it takes to write 120,000 words. And then imagine what it takes to throw those 120,000 words away and do it 2 more times before you get it right. And then imagine what it's going to be to work with an editor who's going to be taking your beautiful genius words and then rubbing them into different shapes and then telling you this is garbage or this isn't good enough, to kind of shape your vision into what it really should be. And then once you get all that stuff done, and once you've paid for a few pieces of art, or you picked up stock art, and you get that particular product out there in the wild, then you get to deal with the first encounter with the enemy. When the customers say, this is garbage, or I don't like this, or you could have done better this way, or I'm not paying $12 for an 84-page PDF, or any one of those kind of things. Those are the things that also kind of tell you a lot about what the business is really like.
Along those lines of kind of you described, then you're going to see what the customer reacts to. The more that you can do that at the beginning.
That's true. That is so true. Yes.
Like go to Gen Con and offer to run a game for people where you throw in a few of those things you want to sell. And you see how they work and how people react to them, and give them a survey at the end that says, what'd you think about, the pre-gens I created, which had these new rules you've never played with? Or what'd you think about my game system that I ran, And if you do that before you've done it, you'll get some experience. On the adventure writing side, it's a little easier because you can work with established systems. But, if you want to write for Knights Black Agents and you go to Gen Con and Origins and volunteer for Pelgrane to run Knights Black Agents, you will run the same adventure, say 5 times, and you'll see what people like about it. And you'll learn how the written word that you were given, what someone else wrote, how that plays out. And you will totally learn from that. And you'll see what people like and what don't, so that when you go write an adventure, you will use the best that you've seen and discard the things that you didn't like. And similarly around rules, you can do that too if you work with rules and crunch and play through it with a lot of different people. That's the key. Like, don't just do it in your own little laboratory and then expect to throw it out to the world and have it be something that's going to please the majorities.
For sure. I mean, that's what to kind of build on that too. I'd also say that, and I know we mentioned, this was mentioned earlier, having a blog where you are working through your ideas in public, right? If you give the world a window into your head and your design space, and open up to comments to find out what people think. And really try to build and kind of grassroots build your audience. That's going to be another way to kind of to help usher you in from seeing if you can do it to really doing it at least part-time or maybe more than part-time.
Yeah. I do think, writing your own stuff, if you want to make money off of it, writing your own stuff is a good way to do it because you get to keep more of the money. But you can't expect that if nobody knows who you are, that tomorrow when you launch, everyone's going to want to support you. Even great established game designers, like today, 2 of my friends are releasing on Kickstarters today, and they've been working, for a long time to drum up that support, and they've paid their dues big time to drum up that support, so that this can be a good launch, right? And it takes that, whether you're large or small, you want to kind of build up that audience ahead of time and have your chops down, right? And not that it ever ends; you always keep getting better, but you want to feel good about what you're providing, and that you feel good that people will like it. In fact, that people have seen it and said, yeah, you should do this.
And I would also say, don't start with a Kickstarter, right? Don't think that you've got this brilliant idea, you make a video and you have some vague ideas sketched out for what the thing's going to be, and then launch a Kickstarter for it, because that's a good way to be drummed out of the business. Yeah. One of the things I did with Demon Lord was I took almost a year off to get the game ready, so that when I launched the Kickstarter, the game was basically done. It had been through all the play testing it was going to go through. I mean, I made some changes after the Kickstarter closed based on more feedback, but I mean, it was largely done, which is what allowed me to get the game out on time and to hit all my dates for myself and fulfill it. If you're so new to game design that you've not ever been published in any format, then with the whole idea of even writing being sitting down and writing something from taking a blank page and filling it with words, you want to make sure you know how to do that first. You want to make sure you can do that first.
And the only other thing I would add is read lots and lots of other people's work and systems, right? Because you can learn that, and play a lot of stuff too. That's really a great way to wrap your mind around it and to sort of start to see the matrix green numbers behind the system that you're running. Gentlemen, we are out of time, but thank you so much for joining me on Tabletop Babble. Before we go, Teos, where can people find you?
You can find me on the Twitterverse at Alphastream, and then on my blog at alphastream.org.
Excellent.
And at conventions. Yes. Come see me. Say hi.
Yeah. We will all be at Winter Fantasy. So if you are there, stop by and say hi to us. And what about you, Rob? Where can people find you?
You can find me all over the place. Usually at the bar I attend most days, Liquid Smoke in Murfreesboro. But if you're not going for that, you can find me on Twitter at RJ Schwalb. You can also find me on Facebook, and I usually let most people, including the occasional robot, become my friend there. And then you can also find me online at Schwalb, that's SEHWALB, entertainment.com. And that is your one-stop place, stop for all things Demon Lord and Schwalb madness.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you both for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, James.
I love talking to those dudes. They really, really know their stuff. Always a great time. Thank you so much for coming on, Teos and Rob. Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and the best way to help it grow and to help others find us is to leave us a 5-star review, or favorite us, or like us on iTunes, or Stitcher, or Google Play, or whatever your pod-catching platform of choice is. To encourage you to do just that, I'm reading one new review, a good review, like a 5-star, verbatim each episode and crediting the person who left it. Make me say anything you want. Today's review comes from iTunes, and it is from Vitalkus. Vitalkus has a review entitled, "Great Time, Go Ahead and Subscribe." And it reads, "If you are interested in D&D 5e, go ahead and subscribe to this now." James Introcaso was hosting the Roundtable podcast on the Tome Show Network. Also worth checking out, by the way. And his show was one that came out reliably and featured reviews/discussions of products, online articles from WotC, talks with industry designers, Kickstarter previews, etc. With the shift to a new show and network, James has indicated that he wants to spread out to include more than just D&D. And if the quality is going to be the same, I say he should go for it. Well, thank you so much, Vitalkus. I hope that we have lived up to the quality of the Tome Show, because that is a high bar to clear, set by the one and only Jeff Greiner. And if you want to support the show financially, there's an easy way to do that doesn't cost you anything extra. Before you shop on Amazon or DriveThruRPG, go to our website, don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com, and click on the banners on the left. Heck, bookmark them and make it easy on yourself. Then just shop as you normally would. It costs you literally nothing extra and throws a few pennies on the dollar our way. Finally, I just wanted to let people know that I'll be at Winter Fantasy this week. If you're there, stop by and say hey. We'll take a silly selfie together or something. Okay, people, you can find everything I do on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's at JamesIntrocaso, and on my website, worldbuilderblog.me. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Special thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Until next time, remember that RPGs are like sex. If everyone's having fun, you're doing it right.